Thank you so much for joining us today for a talk on building communities in ReFi with Dave and Maya. So about BAF, we are a 501c3 nonprofit that aims to accelerate blockchain education and awareness. We are launching accredited classes. We are networking on the educational meetup like this one, and we try to support blockchain clubs all over the world. And we are also supported by Nir and Algorand, which help us keep running. So Maya, thank you so much for moderating. And Dave, thank you so much for coming. I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alexis. And yeah, thanks, Dave, for joining and everyone else. This is part of our Impact Series talks. And I'm Maya. I'm a PhD student at UCSB, and I'm passionate about the intersection of Web3 and climate change, and broadly just Web3 and social impact. And I feel honored to have Dave today, our local Santa Barbara Web3 person join us today to talk about community building in ReFi. And so, yeah, the purpose of this talk today to have kind of a broad educational overview of what ReFi is, trends within the movement, and also talk about opportunities and challenges in community building within this new and growing ecosystem. And I'd like to start with kind of classic intro, a little bit of personal background. So Dave, can you talk a little bit about your story? What did you do before being at LOA Labs? How did you get into Web3 and why? Why are you here?
Yeah, happy to. And first, I want to give a big shout out to my colleague Michael out in the crowd. Michael, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here. And all those of you who have attended or attending today, appreciate you being live with us and helping build out this space. So, everyone, I'm Dave Fortson. I'm the CEO of LOA Labs. LOA, key thing, stands for Law of Attraction. What you give up to the world is what you get back. And our core focus is bringing or to be the laboratory for better world blockchains and to integrate impacts, social, ecological, public goods, public infrastructure, and focus squarely on those areas in Web3. And that's kind of the high level of where LOA Labs is at. But there is a interesting journey here. It definitely starts in a lot of ways at UC Santa Barbara, where Maya and some of her colleagues are based, and where I still live. I've been here for quite some time. Very grateful to live in this town in Santa Barbara. It's beautiful. It's, on a number of levels, ecologically and human-wise, and having the university so close by. It's been amazing, and it really inspired in a lot of ways my journey to protect the planet, both as a young activist when I was at UC Santa Barbara, doing political activism, environmental community activism, and which carried me through a winding journey of working for nonprofits on the ecological front, on the social justice front, of working for a local tech company called Sonos. Back in the day, was a little tech company, and now is a massive one. I was one of their early employees and learned a lot about technology and sales and like corporations and growth and marketing and the whole nine yards. And also, I was pretty deep into politics, running campaigns and being a politician myself, believe it or not, getting elected when I was in my 20s to the local jurisdiction here, the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District Board of Directors, working for a state legislator. And then over time, drifted more into wanting to try to figure out how to support for-profit businesses who are mission-driven. What I think when I started, it was a little bit more nascent. As far as like building business around values. So the early Patagonias, which have now thankfully become more prevalent. Our goal was to work with those type of companies and help them execute their mission through marketing and communications and what we call movement building. So that took me, probably for the past 20 plus years of my career, believe it or not. And along the way, ran into this group called, at the time, called Terra Genesis International, TGI, which was headed up by Gregory Landaway and Christian Shearer. who are now the co-founders of Regen Network. And they said, "Hey, Dave, we know you're in regenerative agriculture," which we were pretty heavy into food at the time with my company called LOA LABS. And they want to know if we could support helping them spin up a blockchain-based platform for valuing natural capital assets, which was a novel concept, right? Blockchain for one, valuing natural capital for two. And I was basically like, sure, sounds interesting. I'm not afraid of technology. I actually rather enjoy it. And certainly anything that moved forward the principles and values around regenerative agriculture was something that I felt pretty strongly about. But I had absolutely zero experience in blockchain. I had probably the same knee-jerk reactions that many people do as to its efficacy. But I did believe in Gregory and Christian and the principles of permaculture and regen ag, and so threw myself into the deep end. And that was actually in 2017, starting very early with them, with Regen at the time. And fast forward, winding road of still running LOACOM at the time, realizing about 2 years ago that my deepening understanding of blockchain technology, distributed ledger technologies, that focused on decentralization, around sovereignty, around governance and community power distribution, around transparency and auditability, was such a powerful technology stack for a lot of the things that I cared for most related to social and ecological justice, that it was a missing piece from my perspective of being able to value impact and have that more cleanly integrated into bioregional communities, into major economics, and that I decided at that time to throw my full self into the business and into that industry, and spun up LOA Labs, and immediately spun up a team, with obviously Regen anchoring our work, but quickly expanded into a number of other projects in blockchain, that all of whom were focused or are focused currently on some level of public good, social, or ecological impacts. And our company is, here we are in 2022, almost 2023, and I feel like we're on the edge of something incredibly powerful and exciting and life-changing. And for me, who went through the 90s, and seeing Silicon Valley really pop at that time, and the information revolution that took place, it feels like we're on the edge of another one that I think blockchain and Web3 are going to usher in. But more importantly, I think regenerative finance is going to be one of the shining stars, because we need it, and because its time has come, right? And how to properly value in its like deepest sense, spiritually, ecologically, economically, financially, you name it. How do we value the planet that we live on, and properly give it a seat at the table? So that's the very kind of a thumbnail version of how I got here. The other key details: I'm firmly planted in this town. I'm fully doxing myself. I have a couple of beautiful kids and a beautiful wife who I met at UCSB. Love to surf and play pickleball, and otherwise just I have a good life here, and I'm very grateful for it.
Amazing. What a story. I love hearing your perspective and sort of situating like how you got where you are. And I love the example with, Silicon Valley. And maybe we'll get into those kind of historical parallels a little bit later. And before we jump into kind of your thoughts on ReFi, I'm just curious to hear, now that we were talking about your personal story, and you come from politics, activism, working in nonprofits, then working in like traditional companies, and then shifted into Web3. How is it being, let's say, like a non-technical person working in Web3? Like, what challenges did you face, and maybe what opportunities did it give you as being like a non-crypto native, I guess we can say? And and how is working in Web3 different from a more traditional sector?
Sure. See, I'll pick apart both those. I think they're kind of different questions. One, it's a good one. I'm in the marketing comms business in a very dev developer-heavy, developer-centric industry. And frankly, it's been challenging at times because the text, code is, like some people like to say code is law, some other people say community is law, but certainly I've had a little bit of imposter syndrome at times, being on the human side and the community organizing, the movement building side of Web3, and trying to sync that with what are the best technology tools, what's the best technology stack, what's the philosophical way of approaching the architectural development of technology to properly engage humans and shifting human behavior for the public benefit. And in that journey, I would say I'm still very actively on. And I feel like I've in a lot of ways I've gone back to school in the depth of learning and the brain pain that I've had trying to consume all of the language, the culture, the technology, literally the code of Web3, of particular blockchain ecosystems. It's been, I literally will go to bed at midnight most nights, and I usually spend, at least an hour and a half combing through Twitter and related links just to go learn and to like dig in and find my own understanding and analogies and ways of understanding what this community is developing, because I do think there's that distance and and frankly the insularity of Web3 and the developer community is a major barrier to adoption. I think it's actually totally appropriate where it's at, and the natural evolution says that we're going to need more human-centered communication around the blockchain technology movement. Being able to speak in plain terms, being able to help onboard people from a user experience, from user interface, from language, from just like how to use the technology and not have people glaze over because they have no clue how to use a digital wallet, or they have no clue what a private key is, or they have no clue what a proof of stake versus proof of work is. So I think we have, frankly, a long way to go. And, part of my goal is helping shorten that, shrink the gap of understanding between Web 2 and Web 3, having spent most of my years in Web 2 community organizing and, human behavior change through conventional systems. So we can pick up on that a little bit later. Web 2 versus Web 3, I think part of it touches on this, certainly. I think probably some of the more radical stuff coming out that it absolutely lights me up is things like governance and community voice and organizing within Web 3 is just a fascinating space. Having been in governance, like literally Web 2 governance, literally being an elected official and supporting candidates and helping pass policies and lobbying, to see the parallels and into Web3 are pretty interesting, and to see Web3, really, I'd say we're in a kind of an inflection point in a lot of ways around governance. I'm got a pretty deep engagement with the Cosmos ecosystem, and their governance tools that are available and ones that aren't available yet. To help people express their opinions and values through a blockchain, where or to design eco credits, through Regen Network, through the values of a bioregion, and how do you show up? Is it through a DAO and through using governance tokens to express your voice and opinion on a particular vote that the whole protocol looks at? I mean, that just, to me, it's just a fascinating area that I think a lot of Web 2 folks probably would struggle with if they imagined that, their next product line would have to be approved by their consumers. Just to, thinking about that for a minute, I've worked with very, very progressive, forward-thinking CEOs in Web 2 companies that are just flabbergasted that, a major upgrade of their technology or their product line might actually be a decision of their community and not of the top-down CEO format, which is, I think, just a really rich area of exploration, I think, over time and reorienting how people think of the differences between Web 2 and Web 3. I think the concept of building in public which is I love in Web3, and having open source, open code, really open dialogue at all times with your community is pretty radically different than what we see in Web2. I think that actually Web2 could learn a lot from. Yeah, I mean, I'll just stop on those two and see how that lands. But those are some areas I'm really fascinated by.
Oh wow, so much to pick from, and I thank you for sharing about imposter syndrome and kind of brain pain. I feel like it's not talked about much in the space. I mean, I see more and more conversation about this, and I feel like it's important to acknowledge that, and I don't know, I feel like it helps people feel less alone in this fast-paced space, and I also really resonate with the human-focused concept of Web3 and importance of providing more accessibility and bridging the kind of dev natives and the rest of the general public, and loved what you talked about governance, and we'll get to that in a little bit once we talk more about LOA Labs. But before we do, just quickly curious about kind of your take on like the big picture, right? We talk here about ReFi, Web3 impact. How would you define what ReFi space is, and what are some major trends you're seeing in the space? You've been involved pretty early on, so curious to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, sure. See, I think I don't know if there's an established definition of refi. I think in a lot of ways it's valuing nature, the intrinsic and extrinsic value of nature, and developing the tool sets to do so. It's having earth at the decision making table. That a lot of times we've both in economic models and in decisions, we externalize the impacts that earth feels from our decisions, and we also don't value its service or its contributions to our fundamental health of our businesses and our just human lives. So in a lot of ways, in ReFi creates more connective tissues from our in day-to-day decision making, from business to politics to daily consumption. I think that's probably what excites me the most. It's in a lot of ways just a more elegant and more integrated way of just valuing the planet than I think we've had. Oftentimes, again, even when we talk about it still, and it's so hard not to do this, we talk about humans and nature, and we are one and the same. And in some ways, it's regenerative finance is helping us find ourselves, find our intrinsic connection to nature, and being able to develop a language around that brings it closer to us, versus externalizing it, leaving it to the taxpayers to clean up messes, leaving it to nonprofits and social service sector to clean up messes. More of like, how do we optimize deep harmony between humans and in our home, in a way that is joyful. It creates bountiful wealth in the deepest form of what wealth is, not necessarily the financial aspect always, but the kind of spiritual, the human, the thriving ecosystems, and the bounty that nature, the world provides, or offers, not to us, right? It's not offering us anything. It's offering, it's just what it does. But we've, I think, exploited it, with great dereliction for a long time. And I think ReFi, it gives us a cleaner path that is less loaded with politics or policy or forced-based mechanisms. And I think it probably can come at a better time given, how urgent the climate crisis is. So that's, I guess, a long-winded version of kind of where I'm at with like what ReFi is. And as far as trends, go, I mean, I think, just kudos to everyone out there who's involved in some way in ReFi. Regenerative finance, I think as a movement is getting quite strong. I really appreciate its global nature. I appreciate, that there is like a deep seated desire to invest. Traditional capital starting to find its way over to ReFi. I think as a trend, and again, I think it's a small, a burgeoning trend, but a trend nonetheless. I think an area that we need to work on, is just the issues of diversity, equity, justice, inclusion. I think is like a big space that just haunts society generally, but certainly and haunts technology even more and haunts blockchain. So like really early on and not making some of the same mistakes that the traditional environmental movement made around marginalized communities staying marginalized and making sure that communities not at the table in traditional power structures and conventions are deeply integrated from day one, and that we realize that social justice and ecological justice are the same, and that they need to be more unified in the way that we design our businesses and protocols, and how we quote unquote value all the various assets in the system. I think is probably an area to work on in ReFi that is, I think, people realize, but there's still frankly a lot of white guys who are running the show, myself included, and the need to bring obviously women and people of color and our global South friends, into the system that is being developed. I think is critical for its long term and short term success. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, totally. More inclusion and representation. That totally agree with that. And I love I love asking this question to people we have over for these talks, because, like you said, there is no kind of concrete definition. So it's very interesting to hear different people's perspectives on what ReFi is. And what I really like about how you framed it, right, is ReFi as a movement. And earlier when you talked about LOA Labs, you mentioned that one of your key functions, right, is movement building. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's a perfect kind of leeway to what LOA Labs is. So kind of going off of that, can you give us a more in-depth overview of what LOA Labs does and how exactly do you approach movement building? Like, what tools do you use for that?
Yeah, I'm happy to explain. And we, and it's good timing. We're kind of building things as we're using them, as you can appreciate in a startup here with LOA Labs. And I think what I've been trying to really keep in mind as and kind of early leadership. And again, my goal is to distribute leadership, and it's already being distributed amongst my own team and helping formulate what LOA Labs look like. And that includes to Michael and Brian, who's on the call, and others who are helping form what LOA Labs is and what it will be. But I think early days, what my goal was to be able to create, to be able to design for what we knew how to do right away, which was really good marketing, communications, and strategy, and working with impact focus blockchain and Web3 companies to make sure that they had a custom service and a partner that understood values driven protocol development, and was able to have enough experience in the broad Web3 space to really help them not only, and again, how to put a nice social post or how to do a nice email or how to build a nice website, but really understood the map, and the evolving and rapidly dynamically changing industry called blockchain and Web3, and where we're in, so deep in it that we in some ways are strategic partners at a core level, and also provide basic and direct services and marketing communications strategy. So that's one part of our business. It's a great business. It's been successful already in our short life, with great clients and partners in the blockchain impact ecosystem. We're also run a validator, and a validator in a proof of stake ecosystem is some people call it a node. It's a critical part of securing any network. Participates in governance. It's a strategic movement around building our strategic plan for building movements in the blockchain ecosystem because of its significant role in governance and in expressing the sentiment and values of a blockchain's culture and ecosystem. So that has been, we currently validate for 5 different projects in the Cosmos ecosystem in particular, and we'll be expanding to add another 5 or so by the end of the calendar year. This has a very technical aspect, that requires, engineers and DevOps type folks, requires governance monitoring, requires being able to strike partnership agreements between protocols, and fundamentally expresses itself very deeply into integrating values-driven code, if you will, into a blockchain's main vein. And that's, from our standpoint, we just figured early on that yes, we can certainly help a protocol and a community communicate better and raise awareness around its values, around its products. But also, LOA Labs itself has its own ethos, its own desire to move into the world and to bring its own essence into a number of other projects that we may not have a direct relationship with from like a client perspective. So whether, again, we validate for Juno Network, which is really an interesting like CosmWasm sandbox, within the Cosmos ecosystem that's not driven by ecology or social justice per se. But we're already working with them on doing a carbon offsetting proposal, for example, to offset their carbon footprint for an entire year. We're working with Gravity Bridge, which is we have both a client relationship and a validator relationship, where they are, essentially a public goods, public focused bridge between the Ethereum and Cosmos ecosystems, bringing over, a bunch of liquidity from the Ethereum world and stable coins and bring them into Cosmos and that being a critical part of building Cosmos as a whole, but also just the whole concept of how do you create decentralized public goods focus, like building the roads and building the the stoplights and building the sewers and building all the things that you need to run a successful digital civilization. We want to be part of doing that and be bringing values-driven proposals, values-driven just governance votes, as well as developing our own products that we intend on fleshing through our ecosystems that will have very specific value for small independent validators. Where even the validator ecosystem itself is becoming more prominent within venture capital circles, where moneyed folks are starting to occupy validator spin up validators because they own lots of tokens, for example, and that can pose a fundamental threat, for example, around centralization. So joining the Staking Defense League, to really kind of hammer this home and organize other small independent validators so that we can do our best to not repeat the same mistakes of power and centralization that occurred in Web 2. So, and then, running things like, for example, BCOWG, the Blockchain Infrastructure Carbon Offset Working Group, which is a consortium of blockchains that all want to focus on how to create interoperable tools for lowering their carbon footprint, right? One of the biggest knee-jerk reactions to blockchain is it's bad for the environment because of its ecological footprint. And a lot of that is very true around, proof of work and Bitcoin in particular. Some would say a necessary evil for the nature of that particular blockchain and Bitcoin as a whole. But proof of stake, one, requires a fraction of the energy consumption. Regardless, we all have a responsibility to offset carbon footprint. So LOA Labs steps in. We are providing the strategic operations, the day-to-day communications. We convene events, and all of this is to create, interoperability, connective tissue between multiple protocols, whether it be Ripple or whether it be Solana or whether it be Cosmos or whether it be Celo. We sit at the middle of a lot of these conversations, connect folks with energetically and connect them practically. We just held an event down in Medellin, Colombia, called Greenhouse, that convened over 50 people from across the blockchain industry to talk about interoperability standards around carbon as a means of, again, not building silos and walls, but tearing them all down and creating more free energy flow around the types of goods and products that need to proliferate in order to succeed. So that's what movement building looks like for us, on a product level and on an engagement level for the moment.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. Very important stuff, and I like that your main goal is the value orientation and interoperability. Operability, just because there is this problem of these blockchain silos. Sometimes it's really cool to see more effort into connecting those into a bigger movement. And since you mentioned that Brian and Michael from LOA Labs are here, I also wanted to give them a shout out, and also feel free to come up and share your perspective on movement building in Web3. I'll throw you an invite to speak as well. And also, anyone else in the audience, feel free to raise your hand to ask questions, make a point, make a comment. It's an open discussion. And I'm also curious actually to focus on, you talked a lot about governance, and you did mention, decentralization of leadership, even in LOA Labs. Yeah, can you talk more about, how does governance look like at LOA Labs, and who is on your team, right? We have Brian Michael here. Um, who are the people behind this movement building at LOA Labs? And how is your governance set up, and what's the goal?
Yeah, there's reality and there's vision of where we want to be. So reality is, as a one-year startup, we still follow pretty traditional like organizational structure. Myself serving as CEO, Brian's director of operations and marketing. Michael runs governance in our validator space. He also manages some key accounts and supports our NFT lab in that vision. So, I think there's the reality of should we DAOify, which to get right to the point right away, I think the short-term answer was no. We didn't think it was, until we got our feet underneath us and our legs, if you will, as a company, that moving directly into that style of company development would make the right sense. And I think, again, with I hope I get a thumbs up from Michael and Brian here, that we also are facilitating definitely a leadership culture where people find projects that matter to them, and we support them. Whether it's, for example, Michael really spinning up our NFT business, and when we hope to be surfacing a project called ReFi Hippies here and not too long. Whether it's Pranav from our team, who's one of our colleagues in Mumbai, India, spinning up ReFi by South, which is an effort to organize and to surface projects in the global South, in India, Pakistan, and Australia, Africa, places like that. In helping underwrite his time to do that. I'd say just generally in Web3, and certainly we're trying to adopt in LOA Labs a culture of agency, of people developing agency around the things that they care about, where they want to work, how they want to work, and what projects that matter to them, whether they're spinning up their own projects or they're working directly on projects that are coming into LOA Labs that need attention. I think we've done a fair to good job at really enabling that within our company, and bringing and empowering, I guess, our team to be able to teammates be able to do that. I think long term, we've discussed, really from very early days at LOA Labs, of what the future looks like for LOA Labs as a company. Right now we're kind of a traditional LLC. Do we DAOify? Do we create a space where, and I was just speaking to Brian about this the other day, where, I want LOA Labs to be, in a lot of ways, I don't know if a sandbox or a container or a really rich, deep, cultured soil for the builders around public goods and better world blockchain to come find a home, and to have a support structure, to have systems, to have operations and protocols that are developed that allow them to succeed, and to lead, and really that our focus as a company is, in some ways, yes, it's, there'll be some direct client service, but at the end of the day, we really want to be a home for like the best talent and the vibe aligned, values aligned humans to come and create and be builders. And so how that expresses itself in the future, I think, is the fun part of this business over the next couple of years as we develop kind of the frameworks and structures to allow for that, and frankly to figure out how to underwrite those types of things, to make sure that somebody is like, hey, I've got a great idea, I've got a game-changing technology, or I've got a game-changing concept that needs a home, that they would want to come to LOA Labs for incubation, or they would want to come to LOA Labs for leadership and support, but they would have a vast agency in what the development of that looks like. So again, I want to temper the vision with what reality is, but I'm pretty firmly believe that we'll reach that vision before too long.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's so cool to be in the space of experimentation and seeing kind of the variety of different partnerships between Web 2, Web 3, traditional corps, turn it into DAOs, or incorporating certain elements of, this new Web 3 world. Very interesting to see where LOA Labs is going to go next. And I feel like the goal and the role that LOA Labs is playing is so crucial in the Web3 space, and specifically around messaging and communications. Because I remember, and I feel like still to this day, that's a big gap that exists between Web3 projects and the broader public. Can you talk more about how do you approach communications in crypto? Like, what are some lessons learned? What worked? What didn't work? What are you still learning in terms of how to create this messaging that resonates with people?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think there's a lot of the Web 2 learnings that are absolutely transferable to Web 3, and even thinking about our future hiring around our marketing business, I do think we'll be looking to pluck more marketing savvy Web 2 folks into Web 3, because I'd say the marketing squad in Web 3 is still pretty small. And it's not the emphasis, as you can probably tell, right? Look at anyone's UX, UI, or look at their general communications. It's insular, it's clunky, it's clumsy, and I think, undersells in a lot of ways the revolution that is happening, which in some ways I don't mind, because it keeps things less heated at the moment. But certainly, I'd say some very practical things moving forward, or the way we approach things. One, in an open sourced anchored products, they're the product, the main product is not the code you're developing so much. The main product you have, the moat you have between yourself and competitors, is your community. And so understanding the culture of your community, the folks you want in your community, where they are, who they are, where they show up, and how to engage them in a Web3 format is probably one of the best lessons early on you should take away from anything that any marketing person tells you. It's like, community is the product. And so and community, and they're not consumers, right? They're not, and this is another big change from Web 2 to Web 3. These are not consumers of your product, or even consumers of your information. In my opinion, they've got to end up showing up as collaborators, right? That they are certainly, yes, you're messaging on a daily basis on socials or on an email, but you're also creating the spaces and the containers to engage and activate and create agency within your communities, to support the development of your products, to become ambassadors for your community, to take sometimes the constructive critiques or negative opinions, and be able to internalize those, and to do the slower but I think more important development of a community that's a mile deep and not a mile wide, right? A mile wide and thin, but I'd rather have a mile deep and really bought in. I've gotten over, just knowing the games, for example, of Twitter. You can go to some Twitter accounts, and protocols, and they've got 100,000 followers, and they put up, a post, and it gets, 60 likes or something, and then you can go to another account that's got 1,000 followers, and you put up a post and it gets 60 likes. The one that's got the latter version, that's the kind of stuff I'm interested in. It's not that I don't want to grow Twitter, but I want to grow with I want to grow with signal, not with noise. And so thinking about how to design for that deep resonant messaging, the social and chemical connections between community members and between, if you will, the kind of core development community and core foundation or whoever's stewarding the protocol and their community, I think is really important. And that can still show up in more classic like marketing tactics and strategies, around graphic design or campaigns or giveaways or things like that. But it's got to feel authentic. It's got to feel genuine, and there's got to be more of I think, a two-way street that is in a peer-to-peer mentality when it comes to development of audiences for projects. So I think from my perspective, I mean, I'd probably on a marketing level, maybe I'll just stop there. Is like, to me, that's like one of the deepest anchors, and then a lot of things flow from there around marketing, comms, design, functions, and how we approach working with our clients.
I love that is how you focus on organic communities, not forced communities. And I love how you said growing Twitter with signal, not noise. And I do agree. I feel like there's still a long way to go, especially in the crypto Twitter. But it's really great to see some of these projects that have really strong communities of engaged collaborators, not the products. So yeah, it's really exciting to see what LOA Labs is doing in the space. And in the remaining time that we have, I kind of wanted to shift a little bit to kind of more critical side of things and some challenges. I'm curious, and again, maybe from more marketing communications perspective, how do you deal with some of the common criticisms? Let's say like in ReFi space, right? It could be, well, you mentioned earlier, right, to energy usage or, greenwashing arguments. How do you address those challenges from communications perspective?
Well, I mean, there's, the larger narrative around crypto, I think is, obviously far bigger than ReFi. Is blockchain fundamentally the right technology given its energy consumption to, to be a partner in solving the climate crisis? I'm borderline on like eye rolling, an eye rolling position at this point when I hear that from traditional sources, and I know we've got to deal with it directly. And I think the Ethereum merge, for example, of moving from proof of work to proof of stake, of just fundamentally helping people, it's like kind of getting away from this red herring, moving on from the red herring mentality around energy consumption, and really being able to shift into usable products that have an underlying technology that is essentially an accounting system, right? I mean, that's what blockchain is. It's a transparent accounting system, and trying to move into sharing out practical, real life IRL products that ReFi is or will be creating. I think is probably our best bet from dealing with some of that more mundane criticism of blockchain. I don't think we do ourselves any favors in like our nomenclature and our once you're in blockchain, and I'm guilty of this as the next person, of like we get insular ourselves, and even trying to communicate it to the public without getting the eyes glazed over is still a challenge even for me, and I'm in the marketing comms business. But I think also it's, people I think take for granted because it's just time, right? It's, people like don't know how credit cards work. They don't even know how their banks work, right? But they, and they don't know how the US dollar works and its ecological footprint. But because it's been around so long, because it's tied into like daily habitual life, the questions that get asked of blockchain aren't asked of kind of traditional financial institutions or even our monetary system or otherwise. So there's a little bit of like, let's just be patient, have time, and ship great products, right? And know we're going to get crapped on by a certain amount of people. We're going to get the typical knee-jerk stories every time there's a scam. But at the end of the day, there's clearly a movement being built. And when those products and those services start to show up in communities, bioregional communities, when they start showing up in a very localist way, and regardless of the tech stack, that they actually have a user experience, a user interface that is easy, it's rewarding, they feel like they have agency, they feel like they have voice, they feel like they have ownership. over what they've done, then the products are going to sell themselves. We can't be, and I'll just say this as a critique of, I think, a critique of ReFi, or just blockchain in general is, we just got to get better at, like, and we're early, so all due patience, keeping in mind here, but we just got to get better at, like, shipping good products. We can't, to a community that's beyond our, 20 favorite friends on Twitter, right? And we got to ship things that regular humans are going to use and they're going to make a difference in their lives. And that's not easy to do, for one, and it's not something that I expect we're going to have a bunch of, like, revolutionary products in the next couple of years. But I feel like in 24 to 48 months that there's going to be some, major developments, from, regen network to whatever comes out of Celo to whatever comes out of Ethereum. I mean, there's just, like, there's real movement afoot that, given even how early we are, I am pretty bullish that, we're going to disrupt some fundamental industries. And whether people know it's blockchain or ReFi or not, they're going to all of a sudden have, an app on their phone, or they're going to have a product in their hands, or they're going to have, a different way that a community is engaged, solving an ecological or social problem, and they're going to have tools that they didn't have before. And to me, that's, again, I'm banking on that our, product development, teams across, our ReFi, that if we focus there primarily, then the marketing will do its job. Right now, the part about marketing for a lot of us in the marketing business is because the scene is so young that we are essentially marketing about what can be, right? We're not rarely marketing what is shipping, because there's just not that much shipping yet. So I think, when marketers can market a product, we are in a happy place. When marketers have to market what is possible, for several years, it's just we're kind of fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah, I love how you put that, and because I feel like that's definitely what's very prevalent in the space, right? There's, like, potential discourse, like the potential to disrupt, the potential to make this impact, and we get to see some of all of this impact on the ground. So I'm very curious, to revisit this question, as you foreseen in what 36 month, and actually assessing some of these disruptions happening in real life. And as we're wrapping up our hour, the last thing I wanted to ask you, what can you recommend to students and young leaders, people who are starting out or only who are learning about the Web3 space, how to get involved, and what advice do you have for those people?
Sure. Yeah, I guess there's a couple, like, gateway drugs, if you will, to this area, that I would recommend. I mean, certainly, we need technologists, values-driven technologists, developers in the space, engineers. I mean, there's no shortage of need for, developers, in this space. So, if you are a developer yourself, or you have friends who are really, smart, code smashers, like, recruit them, right? Recruit them to values driven projects that are going to better humanity. You can follow hashtag ReFi, which, sometimes you'll find, refinancing a house, but more often these days you'll find actually regenerative finance. There's a, rich community around that space. Following ReFi DAO, our friends over there do a good job at holding community and helping people direct, into Twitter spaces just like this that you're holding, where you can at least start to do some discovery around who's doing what does the map look like. And I'd say and recommend that for anyone interested. I can't stress enough, like, to come into this space, while you're in university or just coming out of university is literally, I think, the biggest, most exciting opportunity that I've experienced professionally in my career. And I'm in my 40s now, and I just, having seen a number of different hype cycles of different, the Silicon Valley timeframe, and, the kind of big information, big tech, I just think, for those who live at the intersection of wanting to do something meaningful in their life, wanting to make money, and wanting to have a really rewarding work, that, stretches their intellectual capacity, to its max, in the best way possible. I just think the kind of the intersection of Web3 and climate and social impact is just going to be the most exciting, kind of revolutionary space probably for a good couple of decades, and we're so early. I just can't express enough that even if you come in today, you are so early, you are pioneering in a space that needs a bunch of pioneers. And I'll tell you, it's a very volatile space. It's, you've got to be able to live with major highs and major lows, and often fluctuating budgets and, product, lines. I mean, everything is just, can be different. A year in blockchain is like 5 years in conventional business. So if you like that fast pace aspect, definitely check us out, LOA Labs. Happy to LOALabs.io if you want to just ping us and find us, or you can follow my Twitter. The Gitcoin community and the Ethereum side of things is a really neat area for like general public goods folks to hang out. The ReFi DAO community is another great space to hang out. For those really focused on ecological stuff, like the OG in the space is, like Regen Network, who just shipped their marketplace product this week, which has been really exciting. There are a number of opportunities, and particularly, marketing comms people or accounting people or law people. It really doesn't matter what your profession is. We need all of those folks. We need artists, right? NFT artists. We need people who can throw big events and parties to pull together the humans off of Zoom and get them into rooms together and design magical experiences. Like we're creating a brain, essentially, like it's the blossoming of a new society, wrapped around a tech stack that's designed to build a better world. And I think, all hands on deck. There's a place for everybody. And I see that we got somebody up on stage. How can I help?
Yeah, just back to the comment. I find your statement very optimistic. But what kind of pioneer, and then can you be a non-dev pioneer? What would be your ideal pioneer that you just described?
Well, I mean, I think the pioneering aspect, well, again, and I'm a non-dev, I'm very clearly, explicitly a non-dev who's now hiring devs. But my pioneering, and I can only speak from experience, my pioneering has been, hey, I had a traditional Web 2 skill set, and it was marketing communications. And I basically said, I'm going to figure out how to apply this in Web 3 around values and impact. So it took, frankly, a little searching to find folks that I could align with, and I'd say beyond like the classic look for a job opening, which again, there are job openings even in this bear market in some of these companies. But one of the best things that you can do, and forgive me for all of those who have to join another Discord, but it's to join a Discord community of like, one of these projects that piques your interest. In a lot of ways, and I'll say that we've hired, even for example, or that we've started to onboard people, is who shows up and who starts participating and contributing. And, again, there's a fine line of like, I'm not here to give away free work. But at the same time, like Web3 is so much about like who shows up and takes leadership in a community and just doing what they do and being who they are and having some relevance and tie-in to the value proposition of that particular project. And that is, I've seen over and over and over again, literally people on Twitter who are just like, hey, I had an idea for your project and I whipped up this like cool poster or this graphic or this piece of code or otherwise, and I thought it might be useful to help your project move along. And then those folks get hired, within weeks. And again, that's not going to be for everybody, but it is like there's a pioneer aspect of like, it's like, everyone's doing like barn raisings, for anyone to like date myself here, anyone who's like helped build a house or participated in a community project, to clean up a park or something. So much of that is what's going on in Web3, because a lot of these projects and protocols are really only staffed by a handful of people initially. And then they basically are like, who shows up, expresses interest, participates, and has a skill to offer. And that's who gets hired next. Or let alone your own ability to understand like how to form a DAO or like how to like develop a DApp or other things like that. I mean, that's a whole nother ball of wax, but at least with, some of the traditional non-dev opportunities, jump into a community, show up, participate, engage on a space, and then you find a lane and just contribute something, and then see how that shows up. If you're in the right space, that will create some values alignment match, and ideally some value exchange between that protocol and you.
Wow, I can't think of a better way to conclude this talk. So inspiring, so much food for thought. Thank you, Dave. And I feel like major takeaways is show initiative, show up, invest in organic communities. We need people from all walks of life in the Web3 space. And I see there's another request.
Yeah, and while you're grabbing that person, I definitely want to give a shout to the Block Explorer crew. If anyone's just looking for discovery, they're doing a great job at covering regenerative finance and in just a broad swath of public goods concepts that that across blockchain right now. So, and it actually looks like Cash is maybe one of our speakers. But anyhow, give them a listen if you want to learn more. And and again, a part of it is just to start digging in and doing your own research. And podcasts like theirs are a great way to do that.
Oh, thanks, Dave. Yeah, hey, Cash here, real quick. Great message, and we love where your heart and your head's at. And the Block Explorer is going to be starting a Web3 ReFi-focused community meetup in Santa Barbara. So anyone local,
yay!
We'll send out more details. It's going to be on the first Thursdays of every month, and yeah, love the momentum and love where your head's at. And thanks for hosting, Dave.
Yeah, thank you guys for holding the flame.
Amazing. I'm so excited to see more local Web3 focused events happening. Really looking forward to that. Thanks for sharing, Cash. I want to be mindful of Dave, your time and the audience. But again, the floor is open. If anyone has any last minute questions, comments, this is your time. Otherwise, I wanted to wrap up. And once again, huge thank you, Dave, and the whole LOA Labs team who showed up today, shared so many insights on communications, community building, and Web3 space. So inspiring. And this is what gives me motivation to going forward, and super excited to see what's next for LOA Labs. So definitely everyone check them out, and check out BAF for our next events.
Right on. Thanks for having me. Super grateful to be here. And yeah, all of you media producers out there like Block Explorer and BAF and otherwise, we need a lot more folks, being amplifiers for what's happening in Web3. You all are super important components of this movement. So thank you for taking the time and energy, and everyone who showed up there today. And we'd love to catch up with you. You can hit Michael at loalabs.io or David at loalabs.io. Happy to follow up with you. You can find us on Telegram as well. I'm at EarthBoy75 if you want to hit me up on Telegram. But otherwise, thanks everybody. Have a great day, and thanks again, Maya. We appreciate the invitation.